The princess of Andromeda met a human for the first time, and proposed marriage. The stars stretched endlessly across the sky, but to Princess Saralyn of Andromeda, they were more than just points of light. They were a map of possibilities, a reminder of the vast universe her people had explored and dominated for centuries. Her observatory floated silently above the palace, high in orbit around Andromeda Prime, allowing her a clear view of neighboring systems and the ships that traveled between them. She had studied the galaxy for years, knowing every star cluster, every trade route, every unusual signal that flickered in the void. And yet, nothing had prepared her for the arrival of a human. Humans were a species she had only heard about in reports from traders and explorers. They were primitive by Andromedan standards, fragile in body but surprisingly resilient in spirit. Some of her advisors warned her to maintain distance. "They are unpredictable," they said. "They will not understand our ways, and they might ruin our plans." But Saralyn felt a curiosity she could not ignore. There was something about humanity that called to her, something raw and unrefined but full of potential. At the same moment, far away from the organized perfection of Andromedan space, Lieutenant Alex Carter piloted his freighter through the edges of the Andromeda system. His ship was small and unassuming, barely more than a cargo vessel, but he liked it that way. It gave him freedom. He had spent months traveling between star systems, delivering supplies to distant colonies, and he had learned to handle his ship in ways most would not imagine. Today, however, he was not thinking about cargo or fuel or any of the usual problems. Today, he had made a small error in calculating his warp trajectory, an error so tiny that he had thought nothing of it. Until now. As Alex adjusted the controls, the ship shuddered. Warning lights flashed, and he realized he had emerged far too close to Andromeda Prime. His navigation systems blinked uncertainly, and before he could react fully, the ship was caught in a minor gravitational pull that dragged him toward the orbiting palace. Panic threatened to rise in him, but he forced it down. Humans were not known for grace in these situations, but he had learned to act quickly under pressure. He searched for a place to dock, something stable, and found a landing pad that appeared abandoned. The moment he engaged the magnetic locks, the ship shivered violently, and then, with a soft hiss, it secured itself. He exhaled sharply, realizing that he was now inside what could only be described as one of the most powerful civilizations he had ever seen. Princess Saralyn was already aware of the anomaly. The sensors had detected his ship long before it appeared visually, and her curiosity had turned to fascination as she watched the human pilot maneuver in ways that her technology did not predict. She floated along the observation corridor, her movements graceful and unhurried, eyes following the flickering lights of the freighter as it aligned with the docking pad. When the doors opened, she stepped into the chamber where Alex stood, blinking at the sheer scale and sophistication of his surroundings. He was expecting an empty dock, maybe a few maintenance robots, and certainly not a figure in flowing ceremonial robes, hair shimmering like starlight and eyes that seemed to see through him. He stumbled slightly, a smile of polite confusion forming on his face. Hello," he said, unsure whether to bow, salute, or just stand still. Saralyn observed him carefully. Humans were supposed to be less coordinated in zero-gravity environments, but he moved with a quiet confidence that was unusual for his species. His posture was relaxed, yet alert, and there was a kind of openness in his expression that made her smile. Most beings she met in her court were cautious, calculating, always measuring their words against potential political consequences. This human seemed different. "You are far from your home," she said softly, her voice carrying across the chamber without raising her tone. It was an unusual thing for a princess to do, to speak first, but she found herself compelled. I miscalculated my jump," Alex admitted, scratching the back of his neck. "I didn't mean to land here. I was just trying to, avoid an accident." Saralyn tilted her head, intrigued. Honesty was rare in her world. Most beings would have tried to lie to cover up mistakes to appear stronger or smarter than they were. But Alex admitted his error plainly, without fear or arrogance. It was refreshing. "You have courage," she said after a moment, "and a calm mind even when things go wrong." "That is rare," Alex laughed nervously. "I don't know about rare, I'm just doing what I can." There was something in his simplicity, something unpolished but genuine, that drew her closer. She had seen leaders of entire star systems, strategists who manipulated entire fleets with nothing but calculations and predictions, yet none had fascinated her the way this human did. She felt a strange pull, an impulse she could not explain. "Would you marry me?" she asked suddenly. The words escaped her before she could think them through, before the advisors, warnings, and the centuries of tradition could silence the thought. Alex froze, his eyes widened. "I what?" "I propose marriage," Saralyn repeated, her tone calm and steady though her heart raced. "I find your spirit compelling. I wish for you to be beside me, not as a visitor, not as a diplomat, but as someone equal. Will you marry me?" For a moment Alex laughed, thinking it must be a joke. "You're serious." "I am," Saralyn said simply. She had never felt the need to be coy or to hide her thoughts, and in this moment she did not. She was curious, fearless, and intrigued in a way she had never been before. Alex ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. A human marrying a princess of Andromeda was not something he had expected in any scenario he had ever imagined. He thought of the implications, the politics, the attention, the potential danger, but more than that, he thought of the courage it took for her to ask. Most beings would have waited for weeks, months, even years to test a human's worth. She had not. She had spoken from the heart. I don't know what to say," he admitted finally. "I've never been in a situation like this." "Then say yes," she replied lightly, though she was not demanding it. "Or say no, it matters little. I merely wish to see your reaction, to know if humans are as bold as the reports suggested." Alex looked at her carefully. There was no trick in her eyes, no challenge, no hidden agenda, just curiosity and openness. His mind raced with possibilities and risks, yet something in him admired her directness. Humans valued honesty and bravery, and here was a being who embodied both on a scale he had never encountered. I don't know if I can," he said slowly, "but I think I'd like to try." Saralyn smiled, a gentle curve of her lips, and for the first time in her life, she felt that the stars above were not just maps or data points, but possibilities waiting to be explored. She had met countless beings across countless worlds, but this human, so ordinary in appearance yet extraordinary in essence, held her attention completely. The moment was interrupted by the soft hum of the palace sensors, detecting unauthorized intrusions and signaling the palace guards. Saralyn waved them away, a small gesture of authority that reminded Alex of just how powerful she truly was. The human was barely aware of the weight of her civilization, and she allowed him to remain unburdened, for now. They walked together through the corridors of the palace, Alex taking careful steps as he tried to keep up with her effortless glide. She showed him the gardens that floated in zero gravity, the chambers where light bent in strange ways due to energy fields, and the observation decks where entire star systems could be studied at once. Through it all, Alex remained both awed and remarkably composed, asking questions with genuine curiosity rather than fear. Saralyn found herself laughing at his simple, human perspective. Where Andromedans might analyze the physics of a floating garden and marvel at its precision, Alex marveled at the feeling of floating freely, at the beauty of color and motion, at the joy of something so simple and yet so magnificent. She realized that humans saw the universe differently, not as a problem to be solved or a resource to be used, but as something to experience, to feel, and to wonder about. As the first day of their meeting came to an end, Saralyn and Alex stood on the main observation deck, looking out at the galaxy. The stars shone brightly, and for the first time, Saralyn did not feel alone in the vast expanse. She had met a human, a being she did not fully understand, but one whose presence made the universe seem smaller and yet infinitely more exciting. "I suppose this is the beginning of something," Alex said quietly, his tone half amused, half serious. "Yes," Saralyn replied, her eyes reflecting the distant stars. "The beginning of many things, and perhaps in time you will see the universe as I do." Alex glanced at her, feeling the weight of her words, but also the lightness of possibility. He had traveled across systems, seen wonders he could never have imagined, but never had he felt that one encounter could change so much. And so, in the silent glow of the Andromeda skies, a human and a princess stood together, strangers yet connected, ordinary yet extraordinary, their paths entwined in ways that neither of them fully understood. And the universe watched, waiting for what would come next. Word of the human's unexpected presence in the palace spread quickly. Andromedan courtiers, advisors, and even lower-ranking officials whispered in every corridor, their voices tinged with disbelief, fear, or outright mockery. It was not just unusual for a stranger to appear uninvited in the princess's private observatory. It was nearly impossible for a human, a species so primitive, to even survive in Andromedan space without immediate disaster. Yet here he was, alive, standing, speaking calmly as if he belonged. The palace council convened in a chamber of polished crystals, their surfaces reflecting the distant stars. Sarah proposal of marriage, or even the thought of entertaining it, had thrown them into confusion. "It is impossible," one advisor said sharply, his voice echoing in the high room. "Humans are fragile. They cannot comprehend our laws, our customs, or the responsibilities of the royal line. This, Lieutenant Carter, is not suitable." "Do not dismiss him so quickly," Sarah replied, her tone measured but firm. "There is more to him than what you perceive. Humans are underestimated because you expect weakness. He is not weak." "Your Highness," another council member interjected, "even if he proves some minor skill, he is still a human. We are a civilization that has explored, conquered, and perfected techniques across centuries. One human cannot match that." Sarah considered the council's objections, understanding them, but also knowing their fears were rooted in rigidity. They were afraid to admit that a species so young and untested could possess qualities that Andromedans rarely saw in each other: ingenuity, courage, and a sense of intuition that no machine could calculate. "You will see soon enough," she said quietly, but her voice carried a weight that silenced the room. "Do not underestimate him." Meanwhile, Alex found himself being introduced to the daily life of the palace. It was overwhelming in ways he could not have anticipated. The corridors seemed endless, with walls that shimmered faintly as if alive, and chambers filled with technology so advanced that he could barely understand its purpose. Servants and attendants bowed automatically, their gestures flawless and synchronized, yet none of it felt threatening. It was the contrast between his ordinary human presence and the perfection surrounding him that fascinated him most. Sarah led him through a series of introductions, each more complex than the last. Scientists explained advanced energy fields, diplomats presented interstellar treaties that spanned hundreds of systems, and generals discussed strategies for conflicts that humans would struggle to even imagine. Alex listened, asked questions, and occasionally laughed at what seemed absurd to him. No harm meant, only curiosity. The humans' reactions caused quiet murmurs among the Andromedans. He did not bow excessively, he did not hide his mistakes, and yet he handled every situation with a calm confidence. In one meeting, a counselor attempted to trick him with a complicated political question, hoping to catch him in a misunderstanding. Alex paused, considered, and answered with honesty and logic, framing his response in a way that was simple but effective. The counselor's face fell in surprise, and even the princess could not hide a smile. Later, in the zero-gravity training chamber, Alex faced more challenges. He was expected to move carefully, to follow the precise patterns that Andromedans considered proper for combat and maneuvering in such an environment. But Alex moved differently. His steps were unpredictable, his instincts human, but effective. He dodged, rolled, and adapted in ways that were not taught. Sarah observed closely, her eyes lighting up at every small success. The human's unpredictability was a form of strength. As the days passed, the palace began to feel less intimidating to Alex. He found humor in small things: how the light bent strangely in the corridors, how the servant's synchronization was flawless yet a tiny misstep could cause a chain reaction, and how Sarah herself moved with the ease of someone completely at home in this alien environment. He asked questions endlessly, sometimes naive, sometimes brilliant, and Sarah answered with patience, enjoying his curiosity. Yet not everyone appreciated his presence. Some members of the court whispered behind closed doors, plotting to remove him quietly. They saw his growing influence on the princess as a threat to centuries of tradition. One counselor, the most vocal opponent, claimed that allowing a human so close to the throne was reckless and could invite chaos. Others feared that his simplicity could cause embarrassment or weaken Andromeda's political standing among the neighboring systems. Despite these doubts, Sarah did not waver. She watched Alex adapt, solve problems creatively, and interact with beings far more advanced than humans should manage. Each day confirmed her growing belief that humans were not just resilient, They were extraordinary in ways the Andromedans had rarely encountered. One morning, Saralyn arranged a test of diplomacy. A small delegation from a nearby system arrived unexpectedly, claiming a dispute over trade routes. The council expected Alex to falter, to speak out of turn, or to make some naive error that would embarrass them all. He was seated beside the princess, nervously fidgeting with his hands, but he remained composed. When the delegation presented their arguments, Alex listened quietly, then spoke in clear, simple terms. He did not attempt to manipulate or intimidate. Instead, he asked questions, considered the perspectives of both sides, and suggested a solution that balanced fairness and practicality. The delegates were stunned. They expected deception, cunning, or arrogance, yet the human offered nothing but honesty and careful reasoning. Saralyn's eyes gleamed. His approach was unorthodox, but it worked. Word of the human's success spread quickly among the palace staff and even beyond the court. Those who had doubted him began to whisper among themselves, sometimes in admiration, sometimes in disbelief. The human had accomplished what Andromedans had spent decades trying to master: negotiation without manipulation, strategy without overcomplication, and diplomacy with integrity. As evening approached, Saralyn and Alex walked along the observation deck. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, stars twinkling in patterns that no human should have been able to fully comprehend. Alex looked out, awed, and admitted that he still felt out of place. "I don't belong here," he said quietly. "I'm just me. I don't know anything about royal politics, Andromedan law, or any of this." "You belong here because of who you are, not despite it," Saralyn replied. Her voice was gentle yet firm. "Humans have a way of seeing what others miss. You notice things, react to situations, and act with courage in ways that Andromedans often cannot. That is your strength." Alex smiled faintly, uncertain but grateful. He had faced many challenges in his life, from dangerous cargo runs to hostile pirates, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer complexity of this civilization or the attention of a princess. Yet he also felt a strange sense of purpose, a feeling that he was part of something larger than himself. Over the next several days, the tests continued. Saralyn observed him in strategy simulations where multiple ships and planetary defenses were controlled simultaneously. He made mistakes, yes, but he learned quickly, adapting his thinking in ways that no simulation could predict. The council grew increasingly uneasy. What was happening here? A human was not only surviving but excelling, and doing so without arrogance or manipulation. Even simple things like social interactions highlighted Alex's ingenuity. He did not mimic Andromedan manners perfectly, but he was sincere. He laughed when appropriate, apologized when necessary, and treated others with respect rather than fear. It was a kind of diplomacy that Saralyn found refreshing, and slowly she began to see the human not as a visitor, but as an equal, a partner, and perhaps something more. Then came the incident that tested both the council's assumptions and Alex's character. During a routine tour of the palace archives, a containment field malfunctioned, threatening to release a dangerous energy surge. Panic swept through the area. Servants froze, scientists argued over protocols, and the counselors debated what to do. Alex, however, acted instinctively. He analyzed the situation quickly, moved with precision, and manually rerouted the energy flow, stabilizing the field just in time. The council erupted in astonishment. Not only had he solved the problem, but he had done so in a way that required no Andromedan expertise, only observation, logic, and courage. Even those who had doubted him most could not deny what they had witnessed. Saralyn's admiration deepened. Humans were often underestimated, considered weak and unsophisticated, but here was proof that courage, quick thinking, and a refusal to be constrained by tradition could make a human extraordinary. The princess realized that perhaps she had been too cautious in her view of the universe. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but their unpredictability was a kind of power, a force that Andromedans could not easily calculate or control. As part 2 of this story closed, the palace buzzed with speculation. Who was this human? Could he really be worthy of standing beside the princess of Andromeda? Saralyn did not worry about the whispers. She had seen enough to know that humans, despite their simplicity, had something special that even the most advanced civilizations struggled to match. And in that realization, a new chapter in Andromeda's history was quietly beginning, one in which a human might change everything. The days following the containment field incident passed with a mix of tension and curiosity in the palace. Courtiers and advisors whispered endlessly about Lieutenant Alex Carter, the human who had defied every expectation. Some admitted, quietly and reluctantly, that he was extraordinary, while others insisted that luck could not replace true understanding of Andromedan systems. Yet for Princess Saralyn, each day revealed something more remarkable about him. Humans, she realized, did not see the universe as a puzzle to dominate. They saw it as a challenge to adapt to, and they thrived in ways Andromedans rarely did. It was during a council session about interstellar diplomacy that Alex's unique qualities truly shone. A delegation from the neighboring system of Xiron arrived unexpectedly, claiming disputes over mining rights near a contested asteroid belt. Their representatives were skilled negotiators, seasoned in deception and manipulation. Andromedan advisors expected Alex to be overwhelmed, to falter under pressure, or to make some naive statement that could be used against them. Saralyn, however, had confidence in him. Alex listened carefully as the Xiron delegates laid out their arguments, speaking in precise, formal tones. They assumed he could not understand the complexities of interstellar treaties and resource laws. But Alex, though unfamiliar with the legal codes, approached the situation differently. He asked simple questions, clarifying points rather than trying to impress with jargon. He summarized positions in plain language and highlighted solutions that balanced fairness with practicality. Where the Andromedans overcomplicated, he simplified. Where they hesitated, he acted. The delegation's initial smiles and smirks faded as they realized he was not just listening but thinking critically. One of the lead negotiators, an older Xyronian with patterned skin and sharp eyes, frowned. "You are unusual for a human," she said cautiously. "You do not attempt to manipulate, you do not threaten, yet you find solutions quickly." Alex shrugged lightly, smiling. "I guess I just try to make things work. Fighting and lying often make problems worse." Saralyn watched him, her admiration deepening. Here was a human whose simplicity was not weakness but strength. Where Andromedans relied on calculations, hierarchies, and centuries of tradition, Alex relied on logic, empathy, and adaptability. He represented something new, something refreshing. By the end of the negotiations, a surprising agreement was reached. Both sides walked away with what they wanted, feeling satisfied and respected, a feat that Andromedans believed impossible with their historical rivals. Whispers spread through the court. The human had outmaneuvered the seasoned Xyronians without arrogance, without deceit, and without formal training. Even the skeptical counselors could not deny it. Later that evening, Saralyn and Alex walked through the palace gardens, floating gently in zero gravity. Alex marveled at the plants, some with glowing leaves, others with delicate petals that shifted colors with the light. He asked questions constantly, genuinely curious about every detail. "Why do you not ask permission before touching things?" one attendant whispered to another, astonished at his casual demeanor. But Saralyn smiled. Humans had a different way of observing the world. They approached it with wonder rather than calculation, and often that perspective revealed solutions or opportunities that even the most experienced Andromedans overlooked. "Humans notice things others miss," Saralyn said quietly, as Alex examined a strange floating flower. "They do not follow rules blindly. They question, adapt, and sometimes even improve what exists. That is why I proposed marriage, not out of whim, but because I see potential in your kind. You make ordinary things extraordinary." Alex turned toward her, startled but not offended. "You really mean that?" he asked. "I'm just me, I don't know about extraordinary." "Extraordinary is not about skill or training," she replied. "It is about courage, creativity, and heart. You have all three." Days later, the palace faced another test, this time in the form of a security crisis. A group of pirates, known as the Krellans, attempted a sudden attack on Andromeda's outer stations. The council had prepared for typical threats, fleet maneuvers, shields, and automated defenses. Yet these pirates were unpredictable, using irregular tactics that machines alone could not counter. The Andromedans panicked slightly, expecting their usual methods to fail. Saralyn turned to Alex. "Observe first, then act as you see fit." Alex studied the situation carefully. He noted the pattern of the pirate attacks, their speed, and their likely intentions. Unlike Andromedans, who relied solely on predetermined strategies, he improvised. He suggested a series of countermeasures that seemed unorthodox, minor adjustments to shield frequencies, randomizing fleet formations, and even sending decoy signals to mislead the attackers. The Andromedans hesitated, unsure if his suggestions would work. When the Krellans struck again, the results were immediate. Ships moved unpredictably, shields absorbed unexpected impacts, and the decoy signals confused the pirates, making them retreat. Within hours, the threat was neutralized without a single casualty. The Council was stunned. What they had always believed impossible, a human influencing the outcome of a tactical operation beyond their simulations, had just occurred. Sarah gaze lingered on him as he observed the aftermath calmly, almost as if this was routine. She realized that human strength lay not just in raw power or intelligence, but in their ability to adapt and improvise. They were unpredictable, but in ways that could be devastatingly effective. She wondered if she had underestimated their potential before. The Council, however, was not ready to admit this openly. Some advisors argued that it had been a fluke, that the pirates had made mistakes. Others whispered nervously about the human's influence on the princess and the possible repercussions of allowing him to continue. Yet Sarah's confidence in him never wavered. She saw the truth. Humans, underestimated for centuries, could change outcomes in ways Andromedans could not calculate. One evening, Alex joined Sarah for a private meal in the palace. The food was alien but surprisingly flavorful, a mix of textures and scents that danced across the senses. They spoke quietly, away from prying eyes and ears. "You know," Alex said hesitantly, "I never thought I would end up here. I mean, meeting a princess, floating in her palace, negotiating interstellar disputes. It's not exactly normal for a human." Sarah smiled softly. "Normal is relative. You have done more than many Andromedans in your lifetime. You have faced challenges with courage, solved problems others could not, and remained true to yourself. That is why I asked you to marry me, not as a test, but because I see something rare in you." Alex looked down, embarrassed. "I'm not sure I deserve that. I'm just me. I make mistakes, I get things wrong, I don't have centuries of training or experience like you." "Experience is not always the measure of worth," Sarah replied. "It is heart, courage, and creativity. You have all three. That is more valuable than centuries of tradition." The next day, a special meeting was arranged. Andromedan engineers faced a technical problem in one of the energy conduits powering the palace's defense grid. The automated systems had failed to diagnose the issue, and the engineers were baffled. Alex, having observed the machinery for only a short time, suggested a simple, human-inspired solution. It involved rerouting power temporarily, adjusting pressure valves manually, and using a method that Andromedans considered too simplistic to succeed. To everyone's amazement, it worked perfectly. The energy flow stabilized, the system returned to full functionality, and the engineers stared at Alex in disbelief. The princess's smile was quiet but full of pride. Once again, humans had shown that their way of thinking, different, unconventional, and intuitive, was capable of solving problems that even centuries of Andromedan knowledge could not. Word of these successes spread throughout the palace. Even those who had been most skeptical began to recognize that Lieutenant Alex Carter was no ordinary human. He was clever, courageous, and adaptable. He did not follow rules blindly, but found his own path and succeeded where others expected failure. Andromedans, who prized perfection and control, began to see the value of imperfection guided by intuition. Despite his growing influence, Alex remained humble. He did not seek praise or status. He asked questions, learned constantly, and continued to marvel at the galaxy around him. He saw wonders that Andromedans took for granted, and he reminded them to do the same. This simple perspective, grounded in observation and curiosity, was slowly changing the way those around him thought and acted. By the end of this part of the story, it was clear that something remarkable was happening. The human had not only survived the palace, but had begun to thrive in it. He had proven his worth in diplomacy, strategy, and problem-solving. He had gained the respect of the princess, and quietly many in the council. And most importantly, he had shown that humans were not to be underestimated, no matter how primitive they might seem at first glance. Princess Sarah stood at the observation deck once more, watching the stars. She thought of the galaxy, the endless possibilities it held, and the human who had so unexpectedly entered her life. He was unpredictable, yes, and he would make mistakes. But he had something her people often lacked: the courage to act, the creativity to solve problems, and the heart to remain true to oneself in the face of doubt. She smiled, knowing that this human would not only survive in Andromeda but change it. The galaxy had yet to understand the power of humanity, but she did. And in that realization, a quiet revolution had begun, one led not by fleets or armies, but by courage, adaptability, and the unassuming brilliance of a single human being. The atmosphere in the palace had changed. Whispers followed Alex wherever he went, some filled with admiration, others with suspicion. The human had proven himself capable in diplomacy, strategy, and problem-solving, yet many in the council still hesitated to accept his growing influence. To them, he was a wild card, a species untested in Andromeda's complex political games, and a potential threat to centuries of tradition. But Princess Saralyn, more certain than ever, saw him differently. She saw courage, ingenuity, and a mind that could think beyond the confines of rules and hierarchy. It was during a routine briefing that the council faced a new crisis. A neighboring system, Orcs, had mobilized its fleet near a disputed sector of space. Reports indicated that their forces were superior in number, advanced in technology, and prepared to assert dominance aggressively. The Andromedans had predicted a minor skirmish at most, but the scale of the fleet suggested a potential war. Panic rippled through the council. Some advisors argued for immediate military action, others suggested diplomacy, but none could agree on the proper strategy. Saralyn turned to Alex quietly. "Observe, then advise. Do not be bound by our ways. Think as a human would." Alex nodded, though he felt the weight of the responsibility pressing on him. He studied the maps, fleet positions, and communications logs carefully. The Andromedans relied on rigid formations and advanced calculations, but Alex noticed patterns that no algorithm could predict. The Orcs fleet was strong, yes, but predictable in behavior. Their confidence bordered on arrogance, and they underestimated the creativity of beings like humans. He suggested an unconventional approach. Small, highly mobile ships would move unpredictably along multiple trajectories, while the main fleet maintained a defensive position. Communication channels would broadcast false signals, making the Orcs believe they were encountering overwhelming force in one sector while the main Andromedan fleet prepared in another. It was risky, and many in the council frowned. The plan was so unorthodox that it went against every principle Andromedans valued: precision, calculation, and order. Saralyn, however, trusted him. "We will follow your lead," she said. "I have faith in your judgment." The operation began at dawn. Alex's suggestions were implemented step by step. As the Orcs fleet approached, the decoy ships moved erratically, confusing sensors and forcing the enemy to split their focus. Defensive shields were adjusted in real time based on observations, and the main fleet waited patiently, ready to exploit any opening. The Orcs expected rigid Andromedan tactics, yet nothing was as predicted. By the end of the first day, several enemy vessels had been neutralized without significant Andromedan losses. The council watched in stunned silence. The human had not only predicted outcomes, but had created opportunities that no Andromedan strategist would have attempted. The operation continued over several days, with Alex's improvisation and adaptability proving decisive. The Orcs forces eventually withdrew, their morale shattered, while Andromeda maintained full control of the sector. Celebrations were muted in the council chamber. Some advisors tried to argue that the victory was fortunate, that the Orcs had made mistakes on their own, but Saralyn silenced them. "This was not luck," she said firmly. "Lieutenant Carter's insight, creativity, and courage made the difference. He thought differently. That is why we succeeded." Alex, however, felt uncomfortable with the attention. He did not seek glory, and he did not consider himself extraordinary. He had acted as he always did, observing, thinking, and doing what seemed right, but the effect was undeniable. The Andromedans, who had always valued hierarchy and tradition, were beginning to see that humans could operate successfully outside rigid systems, using intuition and adaptability to achieve results that no amount of calculation could guarantee. In the days following the conflict, the palace became a place of tension and admiration in equal measure. Humans had been underestimated across the galaxy for centuries, dismissed as fragile, untrained, and incapable of leadership. Yet Alex had proven otherwise in ways both subtle and dramatic. He had negotiated treaties, solved technical crises, and even guided military strategy, all without arrogance or deceit. Not everyone was pleased. Some counselors quietly plotted against him, concerned that his influence over Saralin could shift power in unexpected directions. One particularly vocal critic suggested that the princess should be reminded of her duty to uphold Andromedan tradition. Others feared that neighboring systems might see the alliance with a human as weakness, but Saralin's resolve did not waver. She had seen the human's capabilities firsthand, and she knew that courage, adaptability, and integrity could not be measured in centuries of training alone. To further test him, Saralin arranged a challenge that would combine diplomacy, problem-solving, and adaptability. A delegation from a distant system arrived with a complex dispute involving trade, territory, and cultural misunderstanding. The Andromedans expected Alex to fail, assuming the intricacy of the situation would overwhelm a human mind. Alex approached the problem differently. He listened carefully to each party, asking questions that revealed hidden motives and misunderstandings. He proposed solutions that seemed simple but addressed the core issues effectively. The delegates, initially skeptical, found themselves agreeing to compromises they had previously considered impossible. By the end of the session, what seemed destined for conflict had turned into cooperation. The council, watching from their observation panels, could not deny the humans' ingenuity. Even more remarkable was how Alex handled interpersonal challenges. Andromedans often relied on ceremony, hierarchy, and intimidation to enforce authority, but Alex used empathy, humor, and plain logic to build trust and understanding. These qualities were unfamiliar in Andromeda, yet they proved effective. Where systems and machines had limitations, human creativity and adaptability excelled. One evening, after a particularly long series of negotiations, Saralin and Alex walked together in the palace gardens, floating gently among glowing plants. "You have changed many minds already," Saralin said softly. "Even those who doubted you must see your value now." "I'm not trying to change anyone," Alex replied. "I'm just doing what seems right. I guess it happens to have an effect." "That is the essence of humanity," Saralin said. "You act, you adapt, and others are forced to see the result. Andromedans often calculate endlessly before acting. You act and you succeed where calculations fail." Alex smiled faintly. "I suppose it's just different thinking. I don't know if I'm special, I just try." "You are special," Saralin said simply. She reached out and took his hand, floating closer in the zero-gravity garden. "Not because of what you have done, but because of how you think and how you act. That is why I asked you to marry me. That is why I see a future with you beside me." The next morning, a new challenge arose. A sudden malfunction in the palace's central energy grid threatened critical systems, including life support for entire residential sectors. Andromedan engineers were baffled. Automated diagnostics failed to locate the fault. Alex, observing the situation, suggested a hands-on approach using a combination of manual adjustments and observation-based improvisation. He proposed an untested sequence of steps, relying on intuition rather than protocol. The engineers hesitated, unsure if following a human's suggestions was wise. Saralin intervened. "Trust him. He has proven himself in ways even we could not imagine. Follow his lead." Step by step, Alex guided them. The power rerouted smoothly, the grid stabilized, and systems returned to full functionality. Engineers stared at him in astonishment. He had solved a problem they had deemed unsolvable. Once again, humans had demonstrated qualities Andromedans undervalued: observation, adaptability, and courage in the face of uncertainty. That evening, Saralin and Alex met in private once more. "You do not seek recognition," she said, her voice warm. "Yet you change everything around you." "I just do what I can," Alex replied. "I never expected this. I never thought being a human would matter here." "It does," Saralin said firmly. "Humans are underestimated across the galaxy. That is why I chose you. That is why I trust you. And that is why you will continue to shape Andromeda, whether others like it or not." As part 4 of the story closed, tension and admiration coexisted in the palace. Humans had shown courage, adaptability, and ingenuity far beyond what most Andromedans imagined possible. Lieutenant Alex Carter had proven that one human could influence diplomacy, technology, and strategy in ways that even the most advanced species could not fully predict. Princess Saralyn looked out at the stars from her observation deck, reflecting on the transformation underway. The galaxy had underestimated humans for centuries, yet here was proof that even one human, acting with courage, creativity, and integrity, could reshape the course of civilizations. A quiet revolution had begun, one guided not by numbers, not by tradition, but by the unique strength of humanity. She smiled, knowing that the challenges ahead would only grow. Other systems would test them, rivals would rise, and dangers would come. But with Alex beside her, she felt certain that humans could rise to any occasion, not through brute strength, but through ingenuity, courage, and heart. And in that certainty lay hope for Andromeda, hope for humanity, and the promise of a future that no one, not even the most advanced civilizations, would see coming. The palace of Andromeda had never been so alive with anticipation. News of Lieutenant Alex Carter's successes had spread beyond the council chambers, reaching distant sectors and neighboring star systems. Humans were no longer viewed as fragile or primitive. The galaxy had begun to notice that even a single human, with courage and cleverness, could challenge centuries of expectation. Still, not everyone was convinced. Some still whispered that the human's influence was dangerous, that allowing him close to Princess Saralyn could upset the balance of power, and that the unpredictable nature of his species might invite disaster. Saralyn, however, had long since decided. The human had proven his worth repeatedly through diplomacy, strategy, technical skill, and courage. He was not merely surviving in her world, he was thriving, often in ways that her people could not predict. She had asked him to marry her weeks ago, and though he had hesitated at first, he had grown into the role she had envisioned, quietly demonstrating that humans possessed a strength that Andromedans rarely acknowledged. Creativity guided by courage, intuition paired with heart, and the bravery to act when others hesitated. It was during the morning briefing that the next challenge arrived. A fleet from the Viorlian Confederation had entered the outskirts of Andromeda's controlled space, claiming territory that Andromedans considered part of their own domain. Unlike the Arcturans, the Viorlians were known for brutal efficiency and merciless tactics. Their fleets were larger, faster, and heavily armed. Panic spread quickly among the advisors. Some demanded immediate war, while others argued for a cautious approach, fearing that missteps could trigger a galactic conflict. Saralyn turned to Alex. "Observe, then guide. Do not let our traditions limit your thinking. Humans see things differently. That is our advantage." Alex studied the reports with a calm he did not feel. He noted the strengths of the Viorlian ships, their predictable attack patterns, and the weaknesses in their formation. Unlike Andromedans, who relied on exact simulations and centuries of tactical knowledge, he considered human instincts, intuition, adaptability, and the ability to improvise in real time. He proposed a daring strategy: use small, agile ships to harass the enemy while the main fleet held a defensive position. They would manipulate sensor readings and create false signals, forcing the Viorlians to split their forces. Then once they were disoriented, the Andromedan fleet could strike with precision. Some advisors hesitated, horrified at the audacity. The plan defied centuries of Andromedan doctrine, but Saralyn's eyes glimmered with confidence. "We trust him," she said. "Follow his guidance." The operation began at first light. Alex's plan unfolded perfectly. The small, human-guided ships moved unpredictably, confusing the Viorlians and forcing their fleet to divide. The main Andromedan fleet held position, waiting for the decisive moment. False sensor readings sent the enemy chasing illusions, and when they realized too late that they had been misled, the Andromedans struck decisively. By the end of the day, the Viorlians had suffered heavy losses and retreated from Andromedan space entirely. The Council could not hide their astonishment. A human had guided an entire fleet to victory, outthinking opponents who had relied on centuries of experience and technological superiority. Where Andromedans relied on calculations and hierarchy, humans relied on ingenuity, adaptability, and courage. The results were undeniable. Saralyn watched Alex quietly from the observation deck as reports came in. He did not boast, did not revel in the victory. He simply analyzed, observed, and considered the next steps. She realized that humans' humility, combined with their ingenuity, made them all the more formidable. The galaxy had misjudged them for centuries, and now Andromeda itself had witnessed the truth. After the battle, the council convened to discuss the future. Some continued to argue against Alex's presence in the palace, but even the skeptics could not deny his impact. He had solved crises that Andromedans considered unsolvable, guided diplomacy where experts had failed, and defended the realm without over-reliance on brute force or protocol. Every action he took had reshaped perceptions, proving that humans were capable of far more than anyone had imagined. Saralyn addressed the council. Lieutenant Carter has proven that courage, intelligence, and adaptability are just as powerful as tradition and calculation. We have underestimated humans for too long. Today, we acknowledge what I have always known. He is worthy of standing beside me, not only as a human, but as an equal. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, slowly, the murmurs of approval spread. Some counselors bowed, others nodded reluctantly, but the sentiment was clear. Humanity had earned respect in the galaxy in ways that no words or reports could convey. Alex, however, was distracted. He had watched the events unfold, and he was thinking about the princess. He had grown to admire her intelligence, her courage, and her unwavering commitment to doing what was right. He had learned from her, adapted to her world, and in turn, she had learned from him. Their bond had deepened over shared challenges and mutual respect, and now, in the wake of victory and recognition, he realized that he could no longer deny his own feelings. Later that evening, Saralyn led him to the main observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a tapestry of possibilities and wonders. She turned to him, her expression calm but determined. "Lieutenant Carter, will you marry me?" Alex took a deep breath, thinking of the battles, the negotiations, the crises, and the countless moments that had led them here. He thought of how humans had been underestimated, dismissed, and ignored across the galaxy. Yet here they were, proving their worth through courage and ingenuity. And he thought of Saralyn, who had seen his potential before anyone else. "I will," he said finally, his voice steady. "I will marry you, and I will stand beside you not just as a human, but as a partner in all that comes." A smile broke across Saralyn's face, and she took his hand, holding it gently in the zero-gravity light of the observation deck. It was a quiet, profound moment, one that symbolized more than their union. It symbolized the recognition of humanity's value in the galaxy. In the weeks that followed, preparations for the marriage began. Ceremonies were planned, traditions adapted, and the palace was filled with energy and anticipation. Yet even in celebration, humans continued to demonstrate their strengths. Alex contributed ideas, practical solutions, and a perspective that challenged Andromedan norms. His influence was subtle but profound, reshaping attitudes and reminding all who observed him that creativity, courage, and integrity were as powerful as technology, rank, or centuries of training. When the day of the ceremony arrived, the palace was radiant. Beings from across the galaxy gathered, representing countless systems and species. Many came skeptical, unsure how a human could hold a place beside the Princess of Andromeda. Others came curious, eager to witness what many were now calling a historic union. As Saralyn walked down the aisle, Alex met her gaze. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only certainty born from shared experiences, challenges overcome, and mutual respect. The ceremony itself was a blend of Andromedan tradition and human simplicity, a fusion that symbolized the bridging of worlds, ideas, and species. Vows were exchanged, promises made not just between two individuals, but between civilizations. Humans, once dismissed and underestimated, had proven themselves worthy of recognition, respect, and partnership. The union was a statement to the galaxy. Underestimate humans at your peril, for their courage, ingenuity, and heart could shape the course of entire worlds. As the celebrations continued, Saralyn and Alex stood together, watching the stars. They reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The first unexpected meeting, the countless challenges and crises, the victories that had reshaped perceptions, and the quiet moments that had deepened their connection. "I never thought I would end up here," Alex said softly, his hand clasping hers. "I never imagined a human could have this kind of impact." "You underestimated yourself," Saralyn replied gently. "Humans are often underestimated. That is why they are so remarkable." You have shown the galaxy what it means to act with courage, think creatively, and remain true to oneself. The stars seemed to shimmer brighter that night, as if acknowledging the union and the journey that had led to it. The galaxy had witnessed the extraordinary potential of a human, and Andromeda had embraced it. For the first time, the union of human and Andromedan symbolized more than love. It represented possibility, resilience, and the power of underestimated beings to change the universe. In the years that followed, Alex and Saralyn ruled together with wisdom and respect. Humans were welcomed as partners in diplomacy, innovation, and exploration. Their example inspired countless beings across the galaxy to reconsider assumptions about strength, potential, and value. Andromeda itself flourished under this new perspective, combining the precision and knowledge of its advanced civilization with the ingenuity and courage of humanity. Through every challenge, victory, and quiet moment, Saralyn and Alex remembered the first meeting, the unexpected encounter, the proposal, and the choice to trust in courage and heart over calculation alone. It remained a reminder that even in the vastness of the galaxy, ordinary beings could achieve extraordinary things, and that the human spirit, underestimated for centuries, had finally been recognized for the power it always held. And so, standing together on the observation deck, watching the stars stretch endlessly across the sky, they knew the truth. The universe had underestimated humans for too long, and now, humanity's brilliance was impossible to ignore.